Hello, Tracy here with another scrapbooking process video. Today I'm using the sweater weather kit from Scrapbook and Cards Today, and I'm going to be using that kit with two photos that are printed to just a little bit less than 4x4. So I'm starting off by trimming them down with my Creative Memories trimmer. I printed them up at home with my Epson PictureMate charm, and that's a 4x6 printer that I have. And I'm just pulling out some of the papers from the kit, and I'm starting with that wood grain paper from Fancy Pants. That's from the Atwell collection, and it was one of my favorite papers in the Atwell collection. I have used that paper many times in many different ways since it came out, and so I'm going to use it in yet another way today. So I'm just zooming in a little bit so that you can see my position of these photos. So I want them like this because the people are looking in towards the layout, and so I want them so that the people are kind of facing towards each other instead of with their backs to each other, even though it is just the same people in two different photos. So here I'm deciding not to matte these photos, and I'm doing that because if I were to matte them the way that I want them to be layered, I want them to casually lay across one another like this. And if I were to matte them, it would keep me from being able to overlap them quite as much, because if I were to overlap them like this and have mats on each of them, then it would be covering one of the people in the photo over there on the right hand side, and so I would have to overlap them quite a bit less. So I do really want to use this paper though. This is a that checkered paper, it's a plaid I guess, is called Sugar Wafer, and it's by Basil, and it's actually a cardstock, not a pattern paper. It's quite heavy. And then this is that Atwell collection paper that I love so much from Fancy Pants, and I'm just cutting off a 1/2 inch off of two adjacent sides of that paper, because I know right from the beginning, usually I decide at the end about matting my photo, my layout, but at this point I know right at the beginning that I'm going to do some matting. And because I love this paper so much, I don't want to waste the whole paper underneath the layout being covered by the rest of the layout. So I just use my scissors there to cut out the center chunk of that cardstock from Basil, just so that I can use it either on this layout or on another project. So what I have here is an 11.5 by 11.5 piece of pattern paper from Fancy Pants, and I love this paper. I'm just pulling out some gesso, and I use golden gesso because I love the texture of it. It's a thick gesso, and it goes on so smooth. It's just so beautiful. I'm just showing you how much I love it there. I'm using a palette knife to just stir it in the jar, and then scoop it onto my paper, and then I'm using a credit card to spread it around. And I want to use I like using the credit card because it allows me to get a really thin, even layer, and that helps with drying time. And in this case, I'm actually trying to leave a thicker coat in the center and then pull it out so that the edges have a much thinner coat. And at this point, the edges aren't fully coated at all. I do want the edges to be fully coated though, so I'm going to play around with this until I can get the edges coated the way that I want them to. Which basically just means going back and adding a little bit more gesso over here and there where it didn't reach the first time, and now I'm putting it away. Now, one thing that I love about this Fancy Pants collection, and many Fancy Pants collections, maybe all of them, is the beautiful, subtle texture of the paper. It's almost like a cardstock. It's so beautiful, and it makes for a really wonderful background paper for doing mixed media on. And I'm just taking my time to clean off my palette there. I have a Tri-Art palette, and because I was using gesso, I just wanted to make sure that I got it all the way off. That palette wipes dry really easily when you use anything other than gesso, but gesso is designed to stick to things, and so I want to make sure I get it off of that palette. So now I'm just switching to my regular gray work mat. I do like working on a grid because it helps me to keep things lined up. And so I just went to my vellum drawer and I grabbed a couple of scraps of vellum, and also I just noticed that cream colored patterned transparency was there as well. It might be a Hambly screen print. Those are very old. They don't make those anymore. It could have been. It could be something else. I don't have this manufacturer's strip on it. It's just a little scrap. but I really like it, and I think it's going to look nice with this page. So I'm trying to use as many neutrals here as possible, with the idea being that the mixed media that I put on the back, that background paper, which is now drying, that fancy pants paper that I put gesso on, that's going to be the main color, and it's going to be green, because I want to pick up on the green in the green bin in the foreground of the second photo. I really want to actually draw your attention to that, but I'm also going to cover it with some things. So I thought that by putting green on my background would help that. And I had to just go off screen to punch this punch because there's no support under my desk here, and I didn't want to put my full weight in order to punch that down. So I just went to a different area of my desk that has better support and just punched it out. That's a Martha Stewart butterfly punch, and that piece of acetate already had some butterflies punched out of it, but I was wishing that it was at the bottom, that the bottom matched the top. So I just went ahead and punched another shape there so that there'd be a butterfly piece cut out of the bottom as well. So now these are the die cut pieces that I have left from this kit. These are from Pebbles, and I really love the cute little characters. And I'm thinking that this layout might give me a chance to use the gnomes. Not that it's not really a garden theme and there's not really anything gnome-like in it, but I always think of gnomes and mischief. And so I thought that gnomes would kind of fit with the theme of this project, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail when I do the journaling. So I just cut a very, very thin mat, and I don't want that mat to be very even. I cut it even, but when I go to glue the pieces together, I'm going to glue it so that it's less even on one side, just to make it look a little bit more casual and less contrived, I guess. So I'm thinking that this gnome and these two pumpkins look perfect. This project is all about pumpkins, and you probably can't see because the photo is tiny at this distance, but they have pumpkins with them up on the roof, and they're trying to get the pumpkins into the compost bin. It's a new sport that we invented. My husband calls it the Great Pumpkin Toss. And so I don't know what I was doing there, but oh yes, I just took a picture of that setup just in case I forgot. So now I'm thinking it's time to put the color on the background. And as I mentioned, the background is going to be the main source of color on this project. At this point, that was my thought. I end up putting a bit more color than I thought I would elsewhere. But so I'm just going to use my heat tool to just dry that gesso. It just didn't, it felt dry to the touch, but it didn't feel dry. It felt like it might be kind of moist underneath or damp. And so I just went ahead and dried it really, really thoroughly. I probably didn't have to dry it more than I did, but more than it already was, because I think like a good 5 minutes went by while I was selecting the embellishments between when I finished the gesso and when I was ready to start with mixed media. But anyhow, I decided to dry it anyways. So now I was going to use the packaging technique, but I decided to use my block instead. I have two colors of gelatos here. I have pistachio and kiwi. So pistachio is the darker of those two colors. And I just had to run upstairs and get my spray bottle. We were using it upstairs for something, so I usually keep a spray bottle right here. So I really like how this looks. And the reason I'm using an acrylic block instead of the packaging technique is that I know I'm going to want to, I don't want to go overboard. So I definitely want to go slow. I want to put some on, see how it looks, put a bit more on, see how it looks, put a bit more on, and then see how it looks. So I think when I use packaging, my experience has been that the packaging just gets really messy. It's hard to put gelato onto a wet substance, and drying packaging, it just kind of like it moves all over the place under your paper towel and so on. I just felt like I would have better control, and it would be easier for the application and reapplication for me to just use the acrylic block, because I can get my hands on it, I can dry it off, I can reapply, and just kind of like go through the motions that way, the way that you just saw me do. So I did a tester with both colors, but then I started by just applying the lighter of the two colors. So that's the kiwi that you see right there. And that is quite a light color. It's really not going to fit with my fall theme that I have going on, but I knew that I wanted two different shades, and I thought that just I like to start with the lighter shade and then put the darker shade on top of it. And I thought that that would give me a good base, and then I could just smoosh around some of this darker pistachio gelato. And I am just, as you see, I'm just mixing it with my fingertip, and there's sometimes little bits of the gelato get broken off and they wound up on my paper, and if that was the case, I just use my finger to mix it in. I'm really just using my finger as my main applicator here, and you'll see me do that, use my finger as an applicator in a few minutes as well. So instead of using a paintbrush to mix the gelatos into paint with the water, I'm just using my fingertip. And I'm putting on a good healthy dose here of the pistachio. And now I'm going to just make a little pool of pistachio, kind of like a watercolor paint here. And I'm just using my finger to mix it all up. And then I'm making splatters with my finger. So I'm just getting it so that I'm picking it up with my finger, and then I'm just flicking my finger down onto the paper, down towards the paper, and letting the ink fly off the edges of my fingertip and land wherever it lands on the paper. And I really like that look, and it was a bit easier than reaching across for the paintbrush, which I could have done just as easily. But I thought since I had my finger all messy anyways, I thought I might as well go all at it. So I'm just going to dry this, and I love how gelatos dry. I love to watch how they move around on a gessoed paper. And so I'm kind of using gravity to make some of the little pools drip a little tiny bit. I don't want it to look terribly drippy, but I really like the little channels of ink. And what I'm showing you here is that when you have a wet pool of it and you dip the paper towel in it, it creates these little white spots. It pulls the color right off of it, and it creates these little white spots. So there's what the pattern background looks like once I'm completely finished. I just took a photo of it there. I really love how pretty that looks. So one thing that I was doing is I kept testing that large piece of vellum there. That large rectangle of vellum is my bottom layer. And so I kept testing it against what I was putting, against the mixed media that I was putting on the background, just to make sure that a little bit of it would be showing, because I knew that my layers would all be contained within the perimeter of that vellum. So now I'm just putting that pattern paper that is from Echo Park, Follows in the Air. And now this is of course that basil paper that I used that I'm going to use to mat, that I just cut the chunk out of. And then that's a piece of transparency from my scraps. And that is the layers for this one. So I wanted the layers to be very subdued and not to take away at all from the color and the I knew I'd be using pretty big embellishments on this one, so I wanted the layers to not have a life of their own. I wanted them to be second fiddle to some of the other things. So I just used my regular dry adhesive on this. And one tip for when you make a mixed media project is I like the immediacy of a tape runner, but I like the permanence of my Tombow Mono Multi. So I just squeezed a little bit of Tombow Mono Multi on either side of that, of all of my layers once they were attached to each other, because sometimes mixed media backgrounds have a tendency to allow things to pop off of them. So adding the Tombow Mono Multi just makes sure that everything stays put for a good long time. So here I am back to that cluster of embellishments that I came up with at the beginning, the one gnome and then the two little pumpkins. And I grabbed this little piece of grass from my stash. Now I'm pretty sure that I cut that piece of grass with my Cameo back before I had any of these dies. So you can get these dies from Lawn Fawn. There's the meadow die and the grassy border, the grassy meadow die and the grassy border die. and they both will give you different kinds of grassy borders that you can put, and there are other companies that make those as well. But I had made some cards with some landscape on them before I had those dies, and so I had some extra grass left over in my scraps, so I just grabbed one of them to put at the bottom of these pumpkins. I think it's gonna kind of cap off this cluster of embellishments really nicely. So I am going to play around a little bit with the placement of these pumpkins. There's something wrong here. It just looks off balance to me. There's too much of the red and not enough of the orange. And orange is really the color that I think of when I think of pumpkins. So I'd rather see more of the larger pumpkin and less of that smaller red one. So I'm going to end up turning it, like moving it so that the red one is layered behind the orange one, which meant that I had to remove some of the adhesive that I had already put on there. But luckily with those dot rollers, you can just roll it off as long as it doesn't dry. As long as it hasn't dried yet, you can just roll it right off with your fingertip and it comes right off. So now this is not quite as wide as I originally had it set out, and it's not quite working for me because of that. So I'm gonna, it's going to take me a little while before I realize that I need to move it. Yeah, I need to move the red pumpkin over a little bit, and that makes it just a little bit wider, so that's better. So I think I'm going to show you here that I want the gnome to cover, oh, I guess I'm going to put some pop dots on before I do that, but I want the edge of the gnome to cover the pattern paper on the far right side of this embellishment. So I don't want any of that pattern paper showing over there. And then on the left side, I want that red pumpkin to fully cover the place where those two photos overlap. And I want it to go on to the second photo. So I don't want it to look like this embellishment is just under the first photo. I want it to be clear that I just want it to be integrated with both of the photos. Now this does cover up a good part of the green bin, which is a big part of the story. But I think that the green bin is such a different, like it's so bold compared to the other elements inside of the photo that I think it still is noticeable, especially once you read my journaling that talks about the compost bin. So I just zoomed you in so that you could see what I'm doing here with the placement of this extra little bit. I'm making it so that it looks like it's sticking out from behind the gnome, and the gnome and the pumpkins are all pop dotted so that they layer nicely over the photo, which was pop dotted. And so I just put the extra little bit of grass and the mushroom flat against the paper so that it looks like it's behind the gnome. Now I'm putting a piece of wax paper there because part of my title is going to go there. And as I was doing those embellishments, I was just kind of working out where my title would go. And I thought that those two pumpkins would make a really great place for a word of the title. So I definitely want black letter stickers, black foam letter stickers for this because they're just my favorite. I almost always want a black foam letter sticker, unless if I can talk myself out of it. So if I can have a good reason to have anything else, then I'll have something else. And so the word pumpkin, for example, is a great thing to put in orange. So here I am, I'm going to go into my orange letter stickers. The other colors are just not quite right, but I'm not a huge fan of this letter sticker, and I'll tell you why when I come to it. So the black letter stickers that I've used are called Afterglow, and they're from Amy Tangerine, and they're a beautiful casual foam black letter sticker. They're one of my all-time favorites. I do have 2 sets of them in my package here, which is why you see that I'm running out of some letters on some of my sheets, so I'm going to the second sheet when I need to. So this one is going to be called the Great Pumpkin Toss. And so I thought that toss could go down on the pumpkins, and then the great and pumpkin could go up here. And so I'm just going to spell those out and put them on my wax paper so that I can play around with placement. So there we go, is the grate. And I'm just going to trim that down so that the grate and pumpkin are on two separate pieces of wax paper. That will help me to be able to play around with different designs for placement. Now, what I don't like about these letter stickers, these are fairly old letter stickers. They're called Meadow. And even when they were new, what I didn't like about them is that they make for such a large title. They're just so wide that they're very, very difficult to use from a design perspective. But what I thought I could do is overlap them and give them a bit of a fun, casual look. And the layout, that kind of fits with the theme. I'm just wanting to make sure that it has pretty good readability there. And I think it does. I think it does. So I'm going to go with it. So you'll see how I do this. I have layered them so that one is on top of another. Basically, I'm kind of alternating one below with one on top. And I really like how that looks, but because they're layered in such a way, some of them seem like they might just fall off really easily, especially the ones that are layered over top of other ones. So I'm just going to use my Stampin' Dimensional adhesive, and I just cut the edges to get little half pieces, and I'm going to attach the M and the K with those dimensional adhesive pieces, just like that. And I'm also going to do it with the N. I didn't need to do it with the P because the P, there was enough of the P stuck to the photo already that it seemed like it was going to hold, so I just left the P. So there we have the great pumpkin. Reminds me of Charlie Brown. And now I'm thinking I'll want to put something above the P and to the left of the T there, just in that little space. I played around with a couple of different little characters that might go there. The die cuts came with lots of different characters, and then I finally thought, wait a minute, I have gnome down the bottom, so I'm going to put another gnome up here. This is the smaller of the two gnomes that were left over, and I felt like the bigger one, even though it's just a smidgen bigger, it was just too big. Because it's up at the top here, I didn't want something too big and bulky because I like the weight of my layouts to be towards the bottom of the page. And so I'm going to, one of the great things about foam letter stickers is that you can move them a little bit and make them look a little bit wonkier or not so wonky if you kind of take your time to straighten them out. So I'm putting these on really quickly and not trying to straighten them out too much so that they'll have a bit more of a casual wonky look to them. And because I layered the T so that it went over the gnome's beard, I also layered the S so that it went over the other gnome's beard, just so that those two things are kind of using the same elements of design, I guess, so that that's repeated in two places. And now I would love to put another little toadstool up there, or mushroom. And in order to do that, I felt like I didn't want a gnome with the same color jacket as the little, what am I trying to say here? The little mushroom. But then when I switched the gnomes, the other gnome is just too big, and it was just even though it's just a tiny bit bigger, it was just putting it off. So I thought, no, I can't put another toadstool up there because it's just not going to work. So instead I'll put a little flower there. And then I thought, if I'm putting a flower there, maybe I'll put a flower down here too. And then I thought, no, I don't really want to do that. So it's okay that they're not the same. So one gnome has a flower and the other gnome is sitting in a little pumpkin patch with a little mushroom beside him, and that's okay. So now I grabbed a second strip of that grass that I had cut a long, long time ago, probably like 2 or 3 years ago. I can't believe I found it. It was in with my card making supplies. I actually did go looking for it and I found it, so that was pretty cool. One of the benefits of always going through your stuff is that you know where things are. So I just put another little bit of grass up there, even though you can just barely see it, just to tie in with the fact that there was grass on the bottom little cluster of embellishments. So now this is thread that you use to sew jeans. So it's like a golden brownish color, like a mustardy brown. It's not a very pleasant color, but it really works great with this project. It just picks up on some of the golden orangey warm tones in the project and in fall. So I need some more right there. I'm just thinking about where I'm going to put my journaling. So I put a couple of little clumps of thread there, and I'm not used to using that kind of thread. I usually use upholstery thread that keeps its round shape. And so I actually really like the look of this just regular thread. So I'll read my journaling to you. It says, "The tradition that began with Marcel climbing up on the roof and tossing pumpkins into the compost bin continues with his brother Pascal, ... despite my anxiety about it all." So I really hate this tradition. It's the worst tradition ever. It gives me a little fake heart attack every year. But it seems to be really, really important to all the other people in my family. So I just go along with it, and they do it. And then they call me at the last minute, and they always want me to videotape it. So that's what I did. I videotaped it, and I snapped a couple of shots, and then I immediately go inside because I do not want to see the kids going up or down the ladder. And I just go inside and wait to hear ambulances coming, and and luckily they never do. So I'm using a bit of great parenting, huh? Parenting by avoidance. That's my favorite method when it comes to that tradition. So I'm just using some Tombow Mono Multi adhesive to just glue those little bits of thread. And I added a third little bundle of thread there because it felt like it needed something over there. And then I did my journaling with my Stettler Lumo color pen because of the gesso, and more than the gesso, but because of the gelatos. I felt like a slick surface writer would probably write better. So these are Felicity Jane die cut labels that I bought when I bought my black and white paper packs, and I really love this one with the flower on it. I think it's really nice to add something floral to this page, which otherwise is very lacking in flowers. So it's just this really cute coral orange label with a really beautiful little flowery pattern on it. I cut it in half so that I could use it in two different places, and I'm using Chestnut Roan chalk ink, which I rediscovered when I did my scrap room tour, and I was showing some things on my desk, and I remembered, hey, I love that color. So I'm going to try to start using it again, especially with all these fall layouts. It's a perfect ink to use on a fall layout, is that Chestnut Roan. So now I'm going to use these little epoxy shapes. They're not my favorite embellishment in the world, but not my favorite meaning I struggle to use them. I don't know where to put them, but I do really like the little pop of more intense color that they bring to the page. And so I really like where they ended up landing on this layout. I think they look nice. And then I just added some enamel dots. Those are also from the Echo Park Follows in the Air collection. And I just put them in two places. This layout really just has two clusters, not three. It doesn't always have to have three. And now, because there's mixed media, I just wanted to show you, a lot of people say to me, does your layout get really, really curled up? This one isn't too curled up, but I wanted to show you something that you can do. So if you use a full piece of paper instead of just a cutout, so I'm just replicating using a full piece by gluing a piece to my cutout, and then just run your adhesive. Be really, really liberal with your adhesive and run it right along the edge of your mixed media piece, and then just glue it down. Just be really, really liberal with that adhesive, and it will hold it down. And even if it has curled up with the moisture of the mixed media that you've added, it will sit down. And then a second way to make it sit down is to run some stitching around it, which is what I'm going to do next. But it was sticking pretty well just with the adhesive, and I have found that with other layouts as well, that it will stick pretty okay with just some nice strong adhesive. I would not use a dot adhesive for this. I would use a full tape adhesive, like the kind that is solid, not dotted, just because I think it holds a little bit better. And so I am sewing all the way around. And what I did was I actually used that exact same thread that I used in the bundles. That is the thread that I used there. Now I'm wishing that I could have sewn stitching right across the bottom of that grass piece. I was really, really wishing that I could have done that. But I took a look at it and tried to decide is it worth trying to pull it off and run it through my sewing machine. And it just wasn't. It was going to make a big mess, and I just didn't want to do it. So I grabbed my gold Sharpie, my gold metallic Sharpie, and I'm just, it doesn't have to be a Sharpie. It's just that was the best. No, I didn't want it glittery. I wanted it to match the thread. So the thread is not gold. It's not metallic gold. It's like the color gold. So, and now the whole time I've been doing this, I've been thinking these gnomes would look so cute with little jingle bells dangling off of their hats. And I have little tiny jingle bells in my stash. I had no idea. It was so cool. I was thinking, man, where do people even buy those little tiny jingle bells? I have no idea. And I'm trying to do this layout here today. There's no way I'm going to go shopping just for one layout. And then I looked in my stash and boom, they were there. I was like so happy. Oh yeah. It's a good thing you guys can only see my hands, because I was doing a little jig in my scrap room when I found those. So don't even ask me why I have jingle bells, little tiny jingle bells in my stash. It's probably for my dolls, I bet. I bet I bought them for some doll costume or something. Anyhow, I'm playing around with different ways that I could tie this on. I used my 1/16 inch Fiskars punch, and that is the tiniest little hole punch that you can ever find. Maybe you can find a tinier one than that, but I'd be surprised. And it's by Fiskars, and I bought that for making tiny little banners back when banners first came out and were really popular. I had the Stampin' Up! Banner punches, and this little punch, it just punches this teensy weensy little perfect hole. I just love it. It's so cute. Even the hole is cute. Anything small is cute. And then I'm just threading with some Stampin' Up! Linen thread. And I'm tying. So the first time I tied both pieces together at once. I just used a different kind of a knot. And then this time I just used like the regular knot that you tie when you're tying your shoelaces or whatever. But I tied it a little bit too tight. Now this one is too loose and that one is too tight. So I'm going to start by, I'm actually sorry that I'm off screen, but I'm going to cut off that little bell and try again with another piece of thread. And I hope that I move everything so that you can see what I'm doing. So, sorry. So anyhow, I'm tying it like you tie your shoe again, but like to double knot your shoe, but I'm just not tying it quite as tight as the top one. And now I'm going to cut off the top one too. So in order to put two bells on this project, I had to tie 4 knots, but I got it the way I wanted it, which is good. So now I'm just threading that final bell. And I'm going to just take the thread and put it through the hole. And this time when I tie the knot, I'm going to do the same kind of knot, but I'm just letting it, I'm not pulling it exactly all that tight. And there we go. Now that one is done. I like how it dangles there. I thought about using a little glue dot to keep it in place, but I kind of really like it dangling. It's so cute. I think that's my favorite part of this whole project is the cute little bells. Totally an afterthought, but it was worth it. So now I decided I'd put a little bit more splatter on this one. And I thought about going back to my gelatos and making more gelato paint and sprinkling on top of the project as well. But then I decided I'd use some of my Liquitex gold ink. It's very nice to use in the fall. It's nice to use all season, in all of the seasons, but it's especially nice in the fall. And I just use a paintbrush these days. I keep going back and forth between what I use to do my splatters, but these days I'm using a very inexpensive paintbrush. And I just masked it off with some packaging that I didn't use for the packaging smooshing technique today, so I used it for this instead. And now in a second, I'm going to pick this up so that you can see it and have a look at how it looks. This project was so much fun to make. I love these cute little gnomes. They're so adorable. I want gnomes for my garden, and I say that every year, and I still don't have any, even though we've lived in this house for 9 years. But someday I'm going to have gnomes. Anyhow, I really, really love how this looks. Next, you're going to see some of the close-up photos of this project. I had so much fun with this one. It was fun playing with the gelatos and using the smooshing technique to get them on my background in a really kind of random, playful way. And then the gnomes just pick up on the playful theme of this one, as well as the way that the lettering is. And then the journaling talks about our very silly tradition of going up on the roof and playing basketball with the green bin, which I try to be a good sport and go along with it. So at least I get a page for my scrapbook, right? So the paint hadn't dried yet on that one when I took the photo, but you get the gist of it. So thanks so much for watching, and have a really great scrappy week.